Tonight is brought to you by
Flamingo Paint. Superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.
Sasso insecticide spray and coil.
Hello, good evening. Welcome. This is Ghana Tonight. We're live from a news about Desawe Kanda, also live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook and also on 3FM 92.7. I am Alfred Ocansey. Tonight on Ghana Tonight, President John Dramani Mahama has made some bold remarks at the 80th United Nations General Assembly, charging the body to initiate, among other things, a reset, as well as changing the format of representation. We're going to do some analysis and a conversation on the aspects of the president's speech earlier today. Stay with us here on Ghana Tonight. Also, the matter of Galamsey never goes away, continues to wreak havoc. With every delay in fighting the canker, now delving a heavy blow on our development as a country in many ways. A report is showing presence of arsenic, lead, mercury, and cadmium in crops from farms and more. Recently, Ghana Great Company Limited, Greatco, barring the brand. Also, we're seeing now what is happening with the impact of illegal mining on the transferments of Greatco. Stay with us. We've got a conversation on that. Also, on the financial front, Ghana has spent 40 out of the 68 years since independence under IMF programs. This is according to the World Bank. Now, we're at the 17th IMF program. Details of these and more, and whether or not we will go the 18th time, is a conversation on the plate tonight. Stay with us. You're an integral part of the conversation. Let's hear from you. The hashtag we're using is Ghana Tonight on Facebook and on X. Connect with us. Let's get talking. Let's settle for Ghana Briefs.
President Mahama is demanding not only a reform of the Security Council, but also a reset of the global financial architecture, which is currently rigged against Africa. Addressing the 80th United Nations General Assembly in New York, he added that the slave trade must be recognized as the greatest crime against humanity.
Slave trade must be recognized as the greatest crime against humanity. As the African champion on reparations, Ghana intends to introduce a motion in this August body to that effect. More than 12.5 million Africans were forcibly taken against their will and transported to create wealth for the powerful Western nations. We must demand reparations for the enslavement of our people and the colonization of our land that resulted in the theft of our natural resources, as well as the looting of artifacts and other items of cultural heritage that have yet to be returned in total.
Acting Chief Justice Paul Bafo-Boni says he will run an open administration and deepen collaboration between the bench and the bar if approved as Chief Justice. He made these pronouncements when leadership of the Ghana Law Society paid a courtesy call on him in Accra.
I'm going to run a very open administration. The judiciary, the bench needs the bar. And so we are excited that you have also pledged to support the judiciary and its intendments. And then at the end of the day, it is justice for the people that we all seek after.
The discovery of toxic heavy metals in food produce from parts of Ghana has sparked concern. A recent report reveals the presence of arsenic, lead, mercury, and cadmium in crops from farms partially affected by illegal mining activities known locally as Galamsey. Public health specialist Dr. Frank Dodu explained the dangers of consuming food contaminated with arsenic, lead, mercury and cadmium.
You may have scanty quantities in the food which may not be harmful to the body, but there are thresholds that we shouldn't exceed, and that is what standardization is supposed to help us to identify. So a lot of regulation is required over here. If we can empower the Food and Drugs Authority so much such that they'll be able to do the market sweeps, to be able to tell which food items are not wholesome on the market, so we can, rid our market of them, that will be very helpful to us.
The Vice President, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, says over 2 billion Ghana cedis has been disbursed through the District Assembly's Common Fund to support development initiatives. Speaking at the National Dialogue on Decentralization and Responsive Governance in Accra, the Vice President charged local authorities to ensure the resources are used responsibly in order to achieve the decentralization targets.
When decentralization is merged with real empowerment and accountability, therefore, the results can be profound. This is the essence of responsive governance, guided by the principle and decisions that can be impactful, and these are made when they affect the people directly. Our reset agenda puts decentralization at the heart of national development.
This is Ghana Tonight. We're live on 3FM 92.7, also on TV3 Ghana on Facebook and on DSTV channel 279. We're all across the world on 3news.com. As always, proudly brought to you by Flamingo Paint, simply superior. Sasso insecticide spray and coil, tum precom. Coming up next year on Ghana Tonight is one that has generated a lot of conversation and reactions. As expected, the President, John Dramani Mahama, is demanding not only a reform of the Security Council, that's the United Nations Security Council, but also a reset of the global financial architecture, which is currently, in his view, rigged against Africa. He was addressing the 80th United Nations General Assembly in New York. He added that the slave trade must be recognized as the greatest crime against humanity. And he is championing this particular cause. Let's break down the issues, but first off, hear the President specifically speak about matters within the issues of human rights before we get into the financial sector that he talked about. This is the President earlier today. Take a look.
Months, we have achieved significant reduction in inflation from 23.8% in December 2024 to 11.5% in August 2025, restoring price stability for our citizens. Additionally, our currency, the Ghana cedi, has appreciated considerably against other currencies, with Bloomberg reporting it as the best performing currency in the world at one point. Slave trade must be recognized as the greatest crime against humanity. As the African champion on reparations, Ghana intends to introduce a motion in this August body to that effect. More than 12.5 million Africans were forcibly taken against their will and transported to create wealth for the powerful Western nations. We must demand reparations for the enslavement of our people and the colonization of our land that resulted in the theft of our natural resources, as well as the looting of artifacts and other items of cultural heritage that have yet to be returned in total. Innocent women and children and people who are facing collective punishment and forced starvation for no reason other than the fact that they are Palestinian. For nearly 2 years and for the fear of reprisals, we here in this General Assembly have been playing hide and seek with language to find the right words to help us avoid or excuse what we all know is taking place in Gaza. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it looks like a duck, it swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, well, then it must be a duck. The crimes in Gaza must stop. Madam President, the UN Founding Charter is outdated when it comes to representation in this August Assembly. The most powerful post-World War II nations are still being rewarded with an almost totalitarian guardianship over the rest of the world. A continent as large as Africa, with its numerous UN member states, would have at least one permanent seat on the Security Council.
Well, that's the president. That's the president, John Dramani Mahama there. And in fact, this is one that position, the specific statement that he made about this situation in Gaza, and then also our foreign policy position on matters of this nature is what has also gotten some reactions to it. But the president was quite clear in his words that there seems to be some playing hide and seek, playing the ostrich about what is happening in Gaza. It's crime against humanity. That's the president's position on this. Professor Lord Mauto Yavuga is a professor of international relations. He's joining us on Zoom right now. Prof, good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight.
Good evening, Alfred. I'm happy to be here.
Perfect. Now,
good evening to your listeners and viewers.
Perfect. You heard the president was clear in his words and not mention words about what, in his view, has been that lack of frontal approach, being clear, that's the world body being clear in its position on what's happening in Gaza. Now, how did the president's position on this situation strike you, taking into consideration our international relations position or policy as a country?
Thank you, Alfred. And first of all, I must congratulate the president for hitting all the keys in his very historic address. I think he spoke very forcefully and he touched on many issues, demonstrating his depth of knowledge in history of international or global politics and contemporary issues. Now, coming back to the issue about Gaza, I think the president did a good job by calling the whole world out. And for me, it strikes me as Ghana that is articulating a humane, pragmatic, and truthful foreign policy. I've heard people say that the president had gone too far, but it strikes me as though Ghana being consistent in demonstrating that, when there's injustice happening, we cannot keep quiet. And that's consistent with our foreign policy, where we've always put morality and normative causes in action. We may be non-aligned when it comes to the big issues, but we've always been consistent in speaking out against injustice. We did that against apartheid. We did that against occupation in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, in the 1960s. When the Ian Smith unilaterally declared independence, Ghana spoke against that. So I don't think Ghana has done anything contrary to our historic foreign policy of being non-aligned but positive neutral in speaking out against injustice wherever it occurred.
And Prof, I'd like you to sit back a bit for me, right? Sit back a bit for me, because you make the point about our non-alignment, that we are non-aligned. We do not take sides, essentially, with our foreign policy. But then we are progressive in terms of the positions that we take. Now, taking into consideration the fact that, in the president's own words, he indicated that the world has actually been playing hide and seek about this matter. It appears we know what's going on, but nobody wants to stick his neck out to say it as it is. And he decided to take that bold step and take the bull by the horn and call what is happening what it is in Gaza. He says that if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and then it is a duck, that this is a crime. But the world is playing ostrich about this, but the president of the Republic of Ghana is bold about it on the world stage. What does that tell you?
Well, like I said earlier, I think I need to make one clarification. You see, when we say Ghana's foreign policy being non-aligned, I think we forget the other half. Ghana's foreign policy is non-aligned, but positive neutrality. So under Kwame Nkrumah, historically, our foreign policy has been non-aligned, but positive neutrality, which means that we have to be concerned if issues arise, even if it affects the global powers. So we are not just non-aligned, it's non-aligned and positive neutrality. That is even why we could even do business separately with the two superpowers at the time, even though we claim to be non-aligned. And that's what we did beautifully. Now, calling out Gaza, I think somebody has to speak up for Gaza. You notice that even the Palestinian president, Abbas, was not allowed to fly to New York. And President Mahama even talked about that. Now, we as a continent have suffered under what we call neo-colonialism or colonial occupation, imperialism. And we fought many years to regain our independence. Therefore, it would have been a tragedy if Ghana had kept quiet and not speaking out forcefully against what is happening in Gaza, as President Mahama has done. I mean, it's a humanitarian crisis. And being a member of the UN, we are being responsible because the UN Charter actually talks about the use of non-violence means to resolve global conflict. The Charter talks about self-determination of all nations. So Ghana, as a law-abiding nation that adheres to the Charter, I think what the President did was to remind all member countries about our collective responsibility in protecting human lives and ensuring the sovereignty and statehood of Palestine. So I think he did a very good job in that regard without antagonizing anybody, because he's speaking the truth. If others are using language, as he said, pretending not to know or not to know what to say, he wanted to say it as it is, and that is what he did, and I commend him for that.
The extent that I talk about the platform where he said this, he was speaking to the world leaders, Professor Malto. These are the same world leaders that he cites as being playing ostrich, hide and seek about this, and not confronting the issues as they are.
Yeah, so he's calling them out publicly. I mean, the president of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, did the same thing yesterday. He is calling the world leaders out publicly to publicly shame them, because what is happening in Gaza cannot be tolerated. Humanity should speak up, and I think that's what President Mahama, he did it deliberately. I mean, there cannot be any bigger stage than the UN General Assembly on the occasion of the 80th anniversary. The UN was formed in the ashes of the Second World War, and everybody spoke against the Second World War. Every year, European nations and North American nations go to commemorate that Second World War, the horrific event. Then we cannot pretend not to talk about what is happening in today's 21st century. So the president was calling out global leaders who are, he said, they are pretending. Is it not striking that even the allies of Israel, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, France, have come out to even recognize statehood of Palestine, something that they wouldn't have done many years ago, and they would have even breaking out with America to do that. But they are doing that as a way to force the Israeli government to do the right thing. So I think President Mahama did a good job. He should be commended for standing tall and shaming world leaders for the shameless disquiet that they are doing towards the atrocities happening in Gaza.
In fact, this position, as indeed, as you indicated, gotten the president quite some applause. If you look at the global reactions to that particular aspect of his speech earlier today. Let's take a listen to the president again, specifically about the situation in Gaza. Take a look.
The denial of visas to President Abbas and the Palestinian delegation sets a bad precedent and should be deeply worrying to all member nations of the United Nations. Ghana recognized the state of Palestine in 1988 and supported a two-state solution to the conflict since then. And I say, contrary to the claims of some, a two-state solution would not be a reward for Hamas. It would rather be a reprieve for the hundreds of thousands of innocent women and children and people who are facing collective punishment and forced starvation for no reason other than the fact that they are Palestinian. For nearly 2 years and for the fear of reprisals, we here in this General Assembly have been playing hide and seek with language to find the right words to help us avoid or excuse what we all know is taking place in Gaza. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it looks like a duck, it swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, well, then it must be a duck. The crimes in Gaza must stop.
And Professor Ifuga, very strong and stern in his position. And in fact, if you look at the reaction even in the room where he made this statement, the applause that he received in making this clear statement, the same world leaders he was calling out, the same world leaders who clapped for him and gave him the applause. Prof. If you can, yes.
Okay. Yes, because
I couldn't hear you at some point. If you could start your point again.
I'm saying that that demonstrates the power of his speech, and this speech will go down as one of the perhaps since Kwame Nkrumah, when a Ghanaian leader would step up on the global stage and give such a powerful speech, unapologetic, calling out world leaders in the backyard of Donald Trump, who have pretended to lead. I mean, the global, not is wavering and saying all kinds of things. If you look at the speech Donald Trump gave and what President Mahama gave, I mean, President Mahama should walk proudly as a true leader of the globe, because Ghana has to demonstrate that Africans, we care about humanity. So that is why the applause from the audience in the room was so loud, because he's saying things that many of them wish they could say, but for some reason cannot say it. So he spoke for the whole world when he called out world leaders to recognize and call as it is what is happening in Gaza.
This position open up ourselves as a country to any risk whatsoever from what you say?
Well, I don't see any. Of course, some countries will be uncomfortable, because if you remember, if you look at the speech, he even said, because Donald Trump and the United States government had said that the two-state solution is a reward for Hamas. President Mahama pushed back on that. Donald Trump said climate change is a host. President Mahama pushed back on that. So throughout the speech, it's like, without mentioning Trump by name, but he was systematically debunking all the things that Trump has said in his speech a few days ago. And I think the Americans may not be happy, but be as it may, President Mahama have to speak, and he did just that, and damn the consequences.
And our foreign policy, as you referenced a number of times, you say we are not aligned, but we are positively neutral or positive neutrality. This is what Article 40, which you referenced briefly, Article 40 of the 1992 Constitution, which essentially defines our foreign policy as it is in law, entails. And I'm going to come back to you, Prof. This is it. Let's follow this closely. It says, one, in its dealings with other nations, the government of Ghana shall, A, promote and protect the interests of Ghana, seek the establishment of a just and equitable international, economic, and social order. Also, promote respect for international law, treaty obligations, and the settlement of international disputes by peaceful means. International dispute by peaceful means. So that's where the two-state solution that he talks about, in his view, he differs from Donald Trump's position.
Yes.
This particular.
And that's why he also differs in terms of how do we resolve international conflict. If you look at the UN Charter is against the use of force. Actually, force is forbidden. Force can only be authorized when sanctioned by the Security Council. If you remember 2003, under George Bush Jr., America wanted to invade Iraq against Saddam Hussein's so-called weapons of mass destruction. Our own compatriot, Kofi Annan, spoke publicly, forcefully against that it was against the UN Charter, that America didn't have the authorization. They insulted him, they called him names, but he was eventually vindicated when there was no weapons of mass destruction, and that made George Bush the most unpopular president until Donald Trump came along. So Ghana has been consistent, either as a nation or through our compatriots who serve at the highest level of the UN. We want to use peaceful means. If Israel had problems with Hamas, it shouldn't collectively punish all Palestinians. As President Mahama eloquently said, You can't collectively punish a whole people just because an element of the society committed some crimes against Israel. And that is what Mahama was talking about, and I applaud him for speaking out loudly and clearly.
And in fact, you referenced the UN Charter that's captured in the Constitution as well, specific under Article 40 as well, and that enshrines or defines our foreign position or foreign policy position. It says one also adhere to the principles enshrined in, or as the case may be, the aims and ideals of the Charter of the United Nations that you referenced, the Charter of the Organization of African Union, that's the AU now, and then the Commonwealth as well. Apart from this matter of what's happening in Gaza, the president also did talk about matters related to finance. And in fact, the research team here at TV3 categorized the specific areas that the president's speech touched on. And this is it. There were 46 references to Africa's role and our future. That was 46 major themes. And then we also had some 45 specific mentions on the United Nations reforms and representation. That's where he talks about, in his view, the UN must embark on some sort of a reset because he is leading a reset in Ghana. Then he also touched on climate and migration and global finance inequality. And it's on the matter of the global finance inequality that you hear Professor Malto, the president, asking for urgent reforms to the United Nations in terms of the power that they have, and then matters related to the veto power as well that he mentioned in the UN reforms and representation. He says that the veto power should not be the exclusive preserve of just some 5 nations. I want us to take a listen to the president on that, and I'll have your take on this one. This is what the president said about the veto power. Take a look.
I want to add that for the sake of Africa, and quite selfishly for the sake of my 18-year-old daughter, I hope that this new world that is arriving is a place of safety and equality for women and girls. To succeed, we must empower everyone, including women and girls, to reach their full potential. In closing, Madam President, I'd like to congratulate you on your election to preside over this historic 80th General Assembly and on being the 5th woman to hold this distinction. I believe that veto power should not be restricted to only 5 nations, nor should it be absolute. There must be a mechanism in this House for the General Assembly to challenge a veto. No single nation should be able to exercise an absolute veto to serve its own interests in a dispute. In 1995, during the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, Nelson Mandela stood in this very spot, and he said, the United Nations has to reassess its role, redefine its profile, and reshape its structures. It should.
But, well, Professor Malto, so can you hear me, Prof?
Yes, I can hear you. Alfred, I'm here.
Is this current arrangement of this veto power to the 5 nations, as the president says, is rooted in post-World War II order? Is it outdated? Has it fully served its purpose and must be looked at again as one of the reforms the president is talking about?
Yes, Alfred. First, I think we have to commend the president and his research team for bringing out a lot of issues in his speech. As I said, this is a historic speech that can go up to the top as one of the best by a Ghanaian leader. Now, on the issue about reform, that's why I have my disagreement and reservations. And I've said this publicly. I've been on record to say that it is not enough for Ghanaian or African leaders asking for reform. It is a good try. It is a good attempt to try to ask for reform. And President Mahama did the same as other leaders before him. President Akufo-Addo did the same during his tenure. Everybody knows that the UN today does not reflect, it's not the same as the UN of 80 years ago. In 1945, when the UN was formed, only few countries in Africa were independent. But today we have 54 African Union member countries. And if you look at the permanent 5 member countries, some of them have even lost their global clout as powers compared to what they were in 1945. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense to ask for reforms to reflect current reality. Unfortunately, in global politics, such things will not happen, reform will not happen, if it's not going to favor the powerful countries. You know, the way the charter was designed, the charter and the permanent five was a compromise. The fate that befell the League of Nations. You know, after the First World War, the League of Nations was to be formed to stop all future wars. America never got to join the League because the American Senate refused to give the President, Woodrow Wilson at the time, the support he needed. Therefore, America never joined, and the League collapsed. The reason they didn't join or they didn't support the President was that they needed an incentive, something that would make it special for them to be members. So in 1945, at the San Francisco conference that the UN Charter was to be signed, President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, the two leading leaders at the time, had to convince members to insert a P5 with a veto power as an incentive, as a compromise that would keep the powerful nations at the time on board. And what they did was that, apart from giving them that veto, they also made it impossible for the charter to be changed anyhow. For the charter to be changed, all 5 permanent members have to agree to the change. And that is a catch. So that today, as Ghana and other countries are calling for reform, including the change in the permanent membership, we must ask ourselves whether the current P5 members are going to be willing to give up the power they have exclusively enjoyed since 1945. My answer is no. Because if you are not careful, once you take out the permanent membership and the veto power, that will actually dislocate and lead to the collapse of the UN as we know it. Because the powerful countries will not have any compromise, anything that is exclusive to them. So that's why, even though I commend the president for giving it a shot, I don't think, realistically speaking, and in terms of global geopolitical calculations, powerful countries that today enjoy that power, that privilege, will be willing to give it up so easily. So it's not going to happen. It won't happen.
Well, but so then what would have to give? What would it take for this position the president makes, which you agree with, but you say these 5 nations are not going to give it up that easily? Obviously, power is one that, you know, nations, individuals want to hold on to. What has to give?
Well, what has to give? If you see the willingness, if you see the rise into power of leaders in those powerful countries that are willing to admit that the world has evolved. Today, you see the president talk about the global public square. In a globalized village, the UN has become that village square that we have in our countries. Now, if all the other leaders share that and they believe that the UN has to be reflective of a globalized and changed international system, then maybe we may make progress. But like I said, Kofi Annan devoted his 10 years as a Secretary General to reforms, but it never happened. What I think should happen, and the president should be pushing that, is the president should organize and mobilize like-minded leaders. And I commend him for his effort at resetting global health finance, the Accra agenda on global health finance that he's taking to New York. And that's what he's trying to mobilize, because you notice that America and others are also cutting down funding for global health. So President Mahama has taken it upon himself to mobilize the global South leaders from Latin America, Asia, and Africa to begin to make investment in health finance. Similar to that, President Mahama should galvanize and mobilize like-minded leaders to create alternatives along the lines of the BRICS. And we have a history of doing that in the 1950s, when Ghana was a founding member of the non-aligned movement as a middle ground alternative to the superpower rivalry at the time. Kwame Nkrumah, Abdul Nasser of Egypt, Nehru of India, and Suharto of Indonesia, and all those leaders, they came, Tito of Czech Republic, they came together for the non-aligned movement as an alternative. I think the time has come for like-minded leaders to emerge, to form an alternative that would challenge the hegemony. So in international relations, we call that counter-hegemony. Right now, the powerful countries at the P5 of the Security Council can be seen to be hegemonic powers. We need to have counter-hegemony that will challenge that authority. We all see how the BRICS has actually rattled the powerful countries and do not have threatening that any country that does business with the BRICS, he'll punish them, he'll give them trade tariffs. That tells you the power of coalition building in a multilateral international system that is not working. So you build coalitions that you can use to promote certain causes that adhere to you. So President Mahama should follow the footsteps of Kwame Nkrumah. What Kwame Nkrumah did in the 50s by joining to form the non-aligned movement. Ghana should lead a new generation of leaders from the global south to do something similar. That will be his lasting legacy, and that will be alternative to the current system that clearly is not working for all of us.
Prof, I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Professor Mawuko Yevuga, thank you for joining us on this. An international professor of international relations, joining us talking about aspects of the president's speech at the United Nations General Assembly, the 80th session earlier today. Much of this has generated global reactions, as a matter of fact, specific to the position that the president was clear, stern, straightforward, and authoritative on the matters and what's happening in Gaza and what he wants the world leaders to do because of the hide and seek and finding the right words to describe what's happening there, that he put to them straight to their faces, and he received an applause for calling them out. This is Ghana Tonight. Coming up next. Now, we go straight into matters as research has shown that there's some toxic heavy metals in food produce from parts of Ghana has sparked a concern. A recent report reveals the presence of arsenic, lead, mercury in crops from farms partially affected by illegal mining activities known locally as Galamsey. Now, as if that's not enough, we're having to deal with these issues of Galamsey also affecting Greco transformers. It's an issue that we're getting into right now here on Ghana Tonight. But this is it. Poisoned food, poisoned water, and a poisoned air. That's what Ghanaians are gleefully consuming as the ravages of Galamsey, as illegal mining destroys not just lands and vegetation cover, but now human lives. Now, the latest evidence of the full extent of harm activities of illegal mining is causing has also been captured in a mercury and other heavy metals impact assessment report. Now, this report, which we have a copy of, we've just taken parts of it, spans the period of August 2024 to September, that's this month, and the first 2 weeks of this month, has revealed an alarming situation, which we're going to get into right now. Let's put it on the screen. It tells a story, a very troubling one, to say the least, that what you're consuming, you never know, has all these toxic chemicals and substances in there. Konongo Zongo in the Ashanti region, they tested soil in that area, and here's what was found in there. Mercury. Mercury. Some above the threshold of beyond 13,000%. It's a threshold that some allowable amount of mercury can be in the soil. But here's what they found. That threshold has been exceeded by 13,000%. Konongo Dumasi, also in the Ashanti region, mercury was found in the soil, exceeded the threshold of the allowable threshold by some 9,000%. Esiakwa in the eastern region, they tested water. Guess what? Mercury was found in the water, and it's exceeded the threshold by some 900 percentage points. This is a research that was done by Pure Earth and the Environmental Protection Authority of Ghana. Now you have Wassa, Kanyanko, also in the western region. This test was done in the air that the people there are breathing. Mercury was found, as mercury vapor was found in the air that the people are breathing in this Wassa, Kanyanko area. And unfortunately, that has gone beyond the allowable threshold by some 15,000%. All of this exposes the health and well-being of the people living in this area to very, very concerning situations. Now, Konongo Zongo Nakwaboso, they tested fish. Lead was found in the fish, and it had exceeded the allowable threshold of 800% by 800%. That's not the only one. Nyamebechre and Cobra, water was tested there because a number of the Galamsey activities also impact on the water bodies in the area. And as a result, they found arsenic particles in there. And you had over 32,900 percentage in terms of the allowable threshold that has been exceeded. That is how bad, troubling this picture is. And this, the EPA knows this. They have the mandate as well, together with the other ministries and agencies, to help fight illegal mining. Mercury, the key findings that they put in this report, extremely high mercury content in soils at Konongozongo and Odumasi, dangerously high in the air at Wasa Kanyanko, and then mercury in water also exceeded up to 900 percentage points, lead as well over 300 percentage points, and arsenic, that's where the catastrophically high arsenic levels in soils they found in Konongozongo also meant that it had exceeded the allowable threshold of by some 4,265%. And guess what? Not just in soils, but in water as well. So you will be drinking water that looks clean, but all of this you have in there. Arsenic levels exceeding the allowable threshold by 32,900 percentage points. That's not alone. Fish and crops also far exceeded the allowable limits. All of this captured in this report, which you can find the full complement of it on 3news.com. Now, apart from that, the management of the Ghana Great Company Limited, that's GREATCO, they've also raised serious concerns about the growing threat of illegal mining, describing it as one of the major challenges currently facing GREATCO. This is the Ghana Great Company Limited. Now, you want to find out why illegal mining operations Galamsey activities are impacting on the operations of GREATCO? Well, they give some detail earlier today when the minister, in the presence of the media, had GREATCO officials talk to them. Take a look.
Near disaster, because you know, as we talked about, the line right of way, you need to clear it so that when you need to do maintenance on the line, you can go there. Now, the right of way clearing becomes lucrative to Galamseyers, and in a number of areas, our people go and see that overnight, people come and do their Galamseying activities very close to our towers. Now, the towers, you see them as just steel members, but they are carrying a lot of forces and weights. And so the foundation is really calculated. In fact, they do a lot of studies on the ground to design. Every tower foundation is different, depending on where it is. And I'm sure these Galamseyers don't know, but as you encroach close to the lines, we are coming to the point where, in fact, there are some towers that we have had to rush in to do some intermediary reinforcement. Unfortunately, there are some areas that even when our maintenance teams are going, they get shot at, and some of them have had to run away. And so we are trying to see and leverage and get engaged, because those areas is getting to points where GREATCO alone cannot manage. And so we need support from all the forces to be able to.
So, as a personnel of GREATCO, updating the minister on what's happening. Galamsey is impacting on GREATCO. GREATCO is responsible for the transmission of power from the generation point of the various plants and the hydro dams we have at Kosovo, and GREATCO has the responsibility of transmitting the power for ECG to distribute. They are being affected by Galamsey. You have Ghana Water as well, impacted by Galamsey. Konyako and other headworks plants have also been shut down because of the impact of Galamsey on the distribution of water. Then you have air, the air that you breathe, you and I are breathing, the food we are eating, all of this impacted by the activities of Galamsey. So we hear the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources talk about permanent stations for security personnel in some of these areas where Galamsey is taking place. It's one that we're going to keep an eye on because guess what? We're all affected. You cannot be in the Greater Accra region and think that Galamsey is not affecting you based on the details of this report that we have seen, which the EPA is aware of. Stay with us on Ghana Tonight. We'll be back shortly after this quick break. We'll get into some more issues. Welcome back. This is Ghana Tonight. Coming up next, now Ghana has spent 40 out of the 68 years since independence under International Monetary Funds as the IMF programs. The World Bank has revealed in this 2025 policy notes titled Transforming Ghana in a Generation. Right? This is the title of this report, which details how in the last 68 years, in fact, since our independence, we spent 40 out of the 68 years since independence under IMF programs, and still, the economy it's not looking solid. The foundations and the structure of the economy hasn't changed that much. Are we going to go back to the IMF again for the 18th time? If no, have we put measures in place to ensure that this doesn't happen? What we're dealing with now is the $3 billion. The latest is the $3 billion that we are under and the disbursements we've seen over the period with the conditions that we have to meet every now and then, some of which are biting, including all these reviews we've seen to the utility tariffs and all of that. All of it is to tick the boxes for the IMF conditionalities. And then again, this is what the history shows. If you go on the IMF website, you're going to see it. As far back as from 1967 all the way to date, we're still going to the IMF for extended credit facility and in other forms. And take a look at this. I'm going to put that on the screen right now. Straight from, let's just start on from 2019, we see down to 1992. And then also, you see in 1980, we went there for $53,000. Fast forward, 1967. In fact, the agreement was reached on the 17th of May, 1966. It was for a one-year period. This is when we went for the standby agreement after the coup, just to stabilize the economy. We have been stabilizing the economy, seeking extended credit facilities and structural adjustment programs over time. Some homegrown solutions as well were captured when we went to the IMF in 2015. So we said we wanted to define our own program. We're still where we are. Joe Jackson is a financial analyst, CEO of Daylex Finance. Mr. Jackson, good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. This picture that the IMF, in fact, the World Bank is painting to us, 40 years out of our 68 years since independence has been spent under our IMF program. Concerning, to say the least, is it not?
First of all, good evening to your listeners and your viewers. This is an issue which should concern all Ghanaians. We've been to the IMF 17 times. 17 times. Now, the issue is simply this. Each time we go to the IMF, whilst the program is in place, we behave. As soon as the program is lifted, hence, we go back to the very same patterns of behavior that ended us in this problem. That's what we've been doing. And we go back and we binge like it's going out of fashion. We binge on loans. And we do nothing to change the behavior or the patterns that brought us to our knees such that we had to go to the IMF. Listen, going to the IMF 17 times is not even a crime. Other countries have been, South Korea has been there 17 times. The difference is that each time they go, they use the opportunity after the program to conduct the long-term changes to the economy that must be done. Those long-term changes, that transformation that must be done, they try to do it. In our case, we don't. In fact, if South Korea's problem is anything, is that they are so ambitious about the transformation that they fall into trouble again because they overreach. Then they go back. But guess what? Each time they go, statistics tend to show that their performance, GDP growth, etc., goes up and goes up each time they go. With Ghana, each time we finish the IMF program, we dip. because we go back to the same patterns of behavior. If we don't start the long-term transformation that is required, the long-term changes to this economy that is required, getting our people to own this economy, fixing our agri, just two of these changes that are required, we will be back where we were. The lack of discipline, we will be back where we were. So it's legitimate that the IMF questions us and says we spent so long under programs. What has changed?
That's the question. What has changed? Now, if you look at the policies that have been captured and promulgated by this administration that they want to implement, does this give you any conviction that we would avoid going back to the IMF the 18th time?
Actually, the 24-hour economy is an attempt to undertake those structural changes. If they keep the commitment, those structural changes will be initiated. But guess what? These changes will require more than the 4-year cycle of Ghanaian politics. It will require more than the partisan tension, the partisan fights that we have for politics and almost everything else. So as good as the 24-hour economy is on paper, we want to see it implemented. We want to see it not just implemented, but sustained. Now, that is the challenge for those who are bringing it about. That is the challenge for us as Ghanaians, and that is the challenge for politicians and leadership in general. How do we go beyond our partisanship and keep this program going so that the transformation will be required for us not to be on our knees again in front of the IMF, will be undertaken, will be sustained, and will grow and deliver the prosperity that each one of us as Ghanaians
certainly would deserve. And I thank you so much, Mr. Jackson, for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Joe Jackson is the CEO of Delex Finance Financial Analyst as well. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. On behalf of the rest of the team, I want to say thank you as well for staying with us. We're back again tomorrow for another conversation. My name is Alfred Ocansey. Have a good night.
Ghana Tonight is brought to you by
Flamingo Paint. Superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.
Sasso insecticide spray and coil.